Since its inception, almost, Jeep has pretty much ruled this segment. It's just been this outlier that don't you really want a Jeep Wrangler? You either do or you really don't.
The Wrangler has been around for decades. Jeep wants you to know since 1941 on every startup screen, on every Easter egg everywhere, and they've traded on that successfully since then. But it does feel still like they've needed competition to push Jeep forward.
You've heard about the Bronco, you know it exists, it's got a lot of press and a lot of people very interested and a ton of pre-orders, and they're now having trouble filling because it's just that popular.
The Bronco initially was never a rock crawler. It was never designed to do what a Wrangler did. It was designed to be a high-speed overlanding vehicle. But if it's going to compete directly against a Wrangler, it has to do the rock crawling thing too. We have to drive them off-road, but we also have to drive them on pavement for a long time because that's where a lot of people, a lot of owners will spend a lot of time in their Wrangler or their Bronco.
Great cars, great roads, and all the reasons we love to drive.
TV, web, and podcast. This is Everyday Driver.
I'm in the top trim of the Wrangler lineup. Like the Bronco, this has a ridiculous number of trims, but the Rubicon is the one you probably know. Named after the Rubicon Trail, that means I really want all the really good 4x4 off-road stuff directly from the factory. You can buy lesser versions, you can make them into a Rubicon Killer if you want. But if you really want amazing off-road capability directly from the factory, you want the Rubicon trim.
The 7 vertical slots in the grille and the 2 circular headlights, Jeeps cannot look like anything other than this. They have to have extra fenders that look tacked on. That's how Jeeps are. That's just the proportion of them.
It's like the 911 in that they keep refining the same basic shape over generations. And just like the 911, they've had a few generations where people didn't like the headlights.
Jeep will refine this even further. And speaking of refinements, the interior is actually really good.
This generation of the Wrangler is the first version that actually starts to feel kind of advanced in tech. You do have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, you have touchscreens in here now. You can get all the things that feel like modern technology in a design that actually has become fairly modern while keeping its classic shape.
Take the vents, for example. Just clean, beautiful circles. Very rugged looking knobs. The seating position still is disconcerting to me. My knees are almost under the speedometer intact. But the ergonomics are good. You just sit up high and there's plenty of headroom and there's actually a good amount of space.
These entire doors lift off. They actually tell you what torque bit you need to take them off. Your mirrors go too, and there's nowhere to put the doors other than your garage or your campsite. The hatch on this is actually deeper than the one on the Bronco. That's partially because this Wrangler is slightly longer with a longer wheelbase than the Bronco is. The Bronco looks bigger. This actually is slightly longer.
You can push this way over $60,000. The way this one is spec'd is about 50 or so. It's lightly trimmed out, but that's okay. It just proves that you can get a full Rubicon for right around 50.
This Bronco First Edition is $65,000. And that's not because it's the first edition. That's actually because if you put everything on a Bronco, it gets quite expensive.
Look at what Ford's designers have done to reinterpret the grille, circular headlights, but yet say Bronco and make it distinctive. The surfaces are very refined, but the proportion and the shape is very old school and boxy.
I know that the classic Broncos were big slab-sided things as well, but I don't think that's necessarily an attractive styling. It may be slightly shorter with a slightly shorter wheelbase than the Wrangler, but you could never tell it because it's just a behemoth.
Yes, it's got a boxy look to it, but it's the ends of those boxes. It's the way the hood has the fender flares here, and then there's a little bit of sculpture, and the surfaces are a little bit fuller. Packaging is the most impressive thing about this, and to do that, that's why the Bronco looks like it does.
You've got tie-down points, you've got removable roof, you've got removable doors. In fact, Ford felt like it was important to be able to offer a way for you to store the doors in the car. That means they gave you frameless windows. You roll this window down and it drops all the way into the door, and now you have a big box that is the door itself, and the door can come off. It leaves the mirrors on the car, and now you have a door you can put theoretically, into a canvas bag in the back. They included those big bags for us with this press load, and the bags take up half the back storage space. Everything's big and bulky in here to go right along with what Ford is doing on all of their big trucks.
Your goes over any terrain mode is right down here, positioned behind the shift lever. This is where you can control up to 7 different modes in addition to locking the axles.
There is an actual speedometer here and a hot-cold gauge, but everything else is just a digital screen in front of you, and frankly, I just don't like it. They have all these auxiliary switches in the roof. You want to put lights and all kinds of other things on this. There's switches already pre-built here.
Ford thought long and hard. And when was the last time you had an instrument panel that was just pretty much vertical? The only other one like it is a Wrangler.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by CarParts.com. Get the right parts right now at CarParts.com.
Comparing this Wrangler to the Bronco is a little bit difficult because the engines don't all line up. There's a lot of engine choices, but they don't exactly match. Here we actually do have the turbo engine that's available in the Jeep Rubicon. But the turbo happens to be the smallest engine available in the Rubicon. We could have gotten a V6 to go with the Bronco, but then that one's not turbo. It actually has less power than the turbo one does. You confused yet?
You think this is the least engine, the wimpy engine, the one that saves you money. And it does. But this isn't slow by any stretch. Especially in the mountains, you want a turbo.
And what's interesting about this 2-liter 4-cylinder here is that it actually has more torque than the big V6. 270 horsepower here, 290 pound-feet of torque.
This is so good off the showroom floor, but it's such a mix of old and new technology. For example, the electronic sway bar disconnect. That's brilliant. But the chassis, the body on frame, and the way the truck rides and steers still feels very firmly rooted in 1941.
Like the Wrangler, this comes in many, many variations. There are 7 versions of this, counting this first edition.
With the Sasquatch package, this gives you the huge fender flares, the 17-inch wheels with beadlock capability, and 35s, big 35s. Now, you can get the Wrangler with that too. But the Sasquatch package is all anybody can talk about, it seems.
There are 2 engines offered. There is the 2.3-liter EcoBoost turbo. That is a 4-cylinder with a dual-scroll turbo. But this one has the larger engine, the 2.7-liter V6 with 2 turbos. That means 310 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque.
And at altitude, twin turbos? That's pretty fast, especially for something that feels so heavy from the seat bottom down. I'm feeling all the mechanics, the weight of the wheels and tires.
We're thrilled. You can actually get a manual transmission in your Bronco. It's a 7-speed. That is 6 normal highway gears and 1 low-range gear, but you can't get this big boy engine with the manual. That means in this version with the V6, I have Ford's ubiquitous 10-speed automatic transmission.
Ford has given this an independent front suspension, solid rear axle. That's a different recipe than the Wrangler. And you might think that instantly it might be better on road. On smooth roads, it's great. Through corners, there's a good initial turn-in that the Wrangler doesn't have. Even on 35-inch tires, even with the Sasquatch package, this truck is something you can road trip on pavement and be happy about.
I'm incredibly impressed by this, but it feels like I'm driving an observation deck. I'm not really all that involved. I'm aware that I'm going through the backcountry. I'm aware that I'm sawing through nice scenery, but I'm kept at bay. I'm big, I'm imposing, people get out of my way, but I'm not connected really to the truck or to the world.
I love that they spent so much time figuring out what it should and shouldn't be. This is how the Bronco needs to be. It needs to have that feeling of world domination wherever you're driving. I've told myself I am not going to fall in love with a Bronco, and it's giving me every reason to do so.
The Jeep is known for not having great handling on road because it has a solid front axle, which means that steering is kind of like a strongly worded suggestion.
You can't just use this as an SUV. It's too capable. It's too good, and the driving dynamics on road are too poor to just drive this without ever taking it off-road.
I do feel more involved and more aware of what the car's doing through the steering of the Wrangler. Now, it isn't as precise. There's constant micro corrections that are required in a corner and when you're going straight. But the interaction is more organic and feels better in the Wrangler.
I'm not sure I love compromising this brilliant off-road capability for how much time you actually spend on pavement.
I never expected to drive this and have it feel smaller. I didn't expect to drive it and have it feel right-sized. This is large. I would have gotten it in the two-door, but in this big four-door of these two, this is the one I prefer driving.
I'm struck by a thought here. Driving the Wrangler on road, you're just counting down the minutes to when you get off-road.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by Covercraft. Use the code EVERYDAY22 for 10% off your order.
Here's the problem with doing an off-road review of known tough off-road vehicles. The only way for something to win is to leave the other one stuck in the middle of nowhere. Otherwise, they just both make it. So all we can really talk about is what does it feel like to be in each of these while doing a road like this? Now, this isn't the most hardcore off-road ever. The reality is that these things, even in 4 high, are so capable and bouncy. There went all the water in the back that you can just tackle stuff.
We're in 4 high, we're in first, and we're just gonna let the Bronco climb and do its thing. The Bronco feels a lot heavier on trail, but it feels weirdly slightly more capable. All I have to do is just sit here. This is a little strange. It's almost unlike old school four-wheel driving, where you had to kind of be really active. I'm actually more interested in watching my wheel articulation than I am driving up the trail. This is fantastic.
I'm sorry that you can't see how little throttle I'm using to do this. This is absolutely partial throttle in 4 high with the sway bar disconnected, and it goes, okay, here we go. Incredible amount of stiffness here, and of course this has got the 35-inch tires and the Wrangler doesn't, so that adds an extra layer of just squashing the world underneath this truck. Except for super extreme stuff with massive breakover angles, most anything any tourist off-roader is going to do can be accomplished with these trucks.
And for what Ford calls these trail sights that are on the front corners of the hood, it's kind of making sense on the trail. The rest of the time it just looks like a styling exercise and something cool, but that's exactly what they are. You can kind of see where the corners of your car are.
Oh, that's not attractive at all. Wow. Okay, sure. This is why you off-road.
It just, nothing is phasing the Bronco so far. But it definitely feels quite a bit heavier. I mean, it is heavier. It's a huge truck. You've got to have pickup truck kind of thinking in this thing. Sort of, I'll accept a really rough ride when you're on road, but it just pays off when you're out here. It doesn't matter anymore.
This is Sasquatch. It absolutely is. It's just crushing the earth. You don't feel the impacts as much. You're not even aware. Is it hot, cold? What's the weather doing? Is there a rock there? I don't care. I'm Sasquatch. Rawr, crushing the world.
This is extremely capable. And that just means it's a lot more fun. There's a lot less worry. And you might say, well, it makes it like my first Sony. It's just your first SUV or your first real off-roader, and it just makes it too easy. It's still a lot of fun.
It's funny, to be in the Wrangler, you do miss the power bump of the Bronco. It's a force to be reckoned with, and it will not be stopped. This, you got to get your foot a lot deeper in the pedal because you've got to find the power this has.
Even though these aren't quite matched up in power, they're more than matched in ability. The wheel articulation on the Jeep is impressive. It's every bit as impressive as the Bronco. And the 2-liter makes the kind of power. We're at low speeds, so it doesn't matter that you have all this high-end horsepower. Torque is what matters. And it makes these whistly little noises, and you think, oh, that's only the 4-cylinder. This is to be reckoned with. It's like the Jeep is more easily able to pick its way through, where the Bronco, you know you can just roll right over the top of everything.
What's fascinating is that this Wrangler feels so much smaller than the Bronco. It's every bit as capable. I'm not struggling with anything at all. This feels like the sports car of the two. That's a strange sentence, I know, but this feels like the light, agile, well, goat of the two, in spite of the fact that that's not the right term.
I'm also rather impressed at the entire structure of the Jeep. It feels so solid. Just pick my way. What it's made to do. Oh yeah. Just keep reminding yourself, this is what this is for. Zero issues. Zero issues.
So the Bronco's isolating you better. It is. It's just this big block of truck moving down through the earth and crushing everything in its path. But I like being here more. I actually like the seats better. I like the interaction more. I think this is a more engaging place to do off-road. It also feels significantly smaller on every single trail, which is crazy because it's not small. This isn't desert running, this is rock crawling. And so they did design the Bronco for that, but it's where the Wrangler shines the most.
It's easy to think that the Bronco is just going to be the end-all be-all and forget that the Wrangler is so good at what it does. Jeep, making exploring easy for several decades now. I'm not beholden to the tyranny of the new. I'm not saying that the Bronco is the best ever and Jeep should be worried, but what I love is the Bronco should make Jeep rethink everything about the Wrangler because there's been no competition for decades, genuine competition.
Ford originally was using what they learned on the F-150 Raptor program to make a fast trail runner. And then, of course, they realized people are going to buy this and want to take it everywhere they take their Wranglers, which means it needs to rock crawl. And they wound up with something quite impressive.
I feel like at Ford, somewhere on a mood board, there is Bigfoot.
Absolutely. Sasquatch is there on
Bigfoot
somebody's
exists.
wall. Absolutely.
It had to be part of the inspiration, at least a tiny bit. But now the good news is you can choose between both of these. It's going to be a fight.
I'm just excited that Wrangler has competition. It's been the Wrangler forever. I really like the Wrangler. I've liked it for a long time. The JL is the best one they've ever had by a margin. It's a really, really good version of the Wrangler. But the Bronco just demands you notice, doesn't it?
I wanted to not like the Bronco. I wanted to come in and say, they almost made it, but the Wrangler is still king. But man, this is so good. I'm going with the Bronco because the packaging, people and gear is what's impressing me the most. The off-road capability is astounding. But personally, I don't need a rock crawler. I'm not doing that all the time, and I like the balance of what the Bronco offers.
Well, the Wrangler's kind of all over the road because of that front solid axle, but that is a problem, and there's no question that the Bronco is the easier one to drive on a highway. I will absolutely give it that. But every time I got in the Wrangler, I just realized I like being here. I like being this involved. Now, that can be a lot of involvement on the road. It actually throws you around a little bit more on the off-road, but something about it is just that much more endearing. And the more I drove both of these, the more I was impressed with the Bronco, but wanted to own the Wrangler.
But the biggest part is you have choice, genuine choice, between what you like and what you're looking for in your off-roader. I really wanted to kind of not like the Bronco, but everything Ford has done gives me reason to love it, and I do. And of these two, if I were shopping, I would get the new Bronco.
I'm very impressed. Ford has done an amazing job with this, and I think most people that are buying a big off-road truck for the first time are going to find this quite amazing. I just don't find it engaging enough.
Better on-road driving characteristics combined with a little bit more space, a little bit better packaging, I think that would be a future winner. I think that would be a good direction for them to go, because even though I love Wranglers, they're cool, they're interesting, they're fun. I'm not sure that I'd want one.
My wife had a Wrangler at one point. She's always told me that she wants another one. In fact, she's explained it to me by saying that the Jeep for her is what the Lotus is for me. I admit I never really understood that until I drove this next to the Bronco. This is the smaller, more involving, more raw driving experience than the Bronco is, and I find myself liking it more.